Hi, I'm Grant Nelson. This is my dog Bailey, and welcome to Mustache Off Grid. Got her! Woo! What are you doing, boy? What are you doing? Sit, 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 sit. If we can get 20 likes on this video, guys, and if we can get 20 likes or 5 new subscribers, I'll give Bailey a treat on next week's episode. So if we can get five new subscribers or 20 likes, we'll give this guy a treat. He's a good dog and he deserves it. So like and subscribe if you enjoy the channel. Hi guys, it's Grant Nelson again here with the Mustache Off-Grid YouTube channel. In case you're new to the channel, I cover various off-grid and homesteading topics. And anyway, I'll get into the topics here. Today I wanted to just give you guys a little bit of my story, you know, kind of going off-grid and kind of a testimony of you know, how I kind of came about it, and what kind of drove me to do it. And also I'll talk a little bit about foraging. Just wanted to show you guys this. This is a black walnut. They grow out here pretty wild. Anyway, it's a black walnut, and you can eat the inside, the meat of the walnut. This green part on the outside is the hull, and you can make tinctures out of that, and they're an anti-parasite. So basically, if you have worms or you get trichinosis or different things like that, it's very good for getting rid of different parasites. And you can kind of make a tincture of that. A lot of people use it for dye, a brown dye, because it'll stain your hands and stuff, and it will, when it stains your hands and stuff, you won't be able to get it out for a very long time. And if you do it to clothing or yarn or things like that, it'll stay in there for a long time. But also I use it as a trap dye for fur trapping. So before every trapping season, I prepare my traps and I boil them and get all the rust off them and all the scent off them from the prior season. And I'll take a bucket full of water and soak these walnut hulls, the outer green part, which is a shell. See if I can open this. You can see it's the inside of them, but this comes off and there's a nut inside of it. And the nut inside of it, if you take this outer part, got kind of a nice black walnut smell to it. But if you take the green part, the hull, the outside that I'm talking about here, I soak my traps for fur trapping in that, and it's a natural scent, but also it dyes them so they blend in a little bit better, makes them a little bit brown, and things like that. So just figured I'd talk about the black walnut a little bit. I wanted to talk about foraging, and really for me, a lot of people have this thought in their mind of going out to the land and getting everything completely from nature, and you can. I think, in my opinion, it's you can get everything completely from nature if you're eating animals. If you're just wanting to live off black walnuts and you know, different plants growing, you're going to have a hard time out there. I'm actually making a brief foraging video for this weekend. It'll probably be out on Saturday. And as far as it goes, we'll have a brief foraging video on Saturday, just showing a couple different wild plants. But anyway, I was talking about, you know, a lot of people have this thought that they're going to go out into the wilderness and they're going to a lot of people have this thought that they're going to go out into the wilderness and they're going to get all of their food just from picking plants. And that's a little bit romanticized. It can be a really good supplement to your diet. You can get a lot of vitamins and minerals and things like that from wild plants. And there's a lot of medicinal qualities to the wild plants. But to live off just wild plants, it'd be pretty hard. And I'll say this, that a lot of the wild plants in general are very bitter. And it's clear to me when you taste them that humans weren't really meant just to live on that stuff. I'm not saying that we weren't meant to eat it a little bit. I mean, even a dog might eat some grass here or there. And we're omnivores. But you can tell clearly if something doesn't taste good, that's kind of a natural, it's a natural deterrent to predators and stuff. And that's why those plants taste bitter. And animals that aren't supposed to be eating those plants, you know, generally won't like the taste as much. And I'm not saying that there isn't some ways to prepare wild plants that taste pretty good. Most of these things, if you're in a survival situation, they can get you by. And my foraging books that I have read actually recommend, if you can, and you're out in the wilderness in a survival situation, to try to get animal flesh to survive. It's more of a complete food. It has more complete nutrients, proteins, fats, things like that that we need. Now, black walnut and other nuts as well, acorns, hickory nuts, have some fats and proteins in them as well. They're one of the better things to eat if you can get, and it's easy to find a lot of them too, because they all just fall on the ground and you can gather up a bunch of them and crack them open. So if you can find a black walnut or an acorn tree or a hickory tree in the wild, those can be really good ways to sustain yourself temporarily until you're, you know, to a point that you have some other food, hopefully an animal that you catch or something like that. Acorns you're going to have to blanch quite a bit to make them palatable. You're going to have to put them in water and boil them and drain it and boil them and drain it and boil them. Hickory nuts are probably pretty similar, but you can eat them as well. Black walnuts, you don't have to blanch them quite as much. Once you take the hull off, if you let them dry in the sun for quite a while, the inside, the meat of the nut is very palatable right away. You don't have to blanch them or anything like that, which is nice. Trees are going to be your best bet for foraging if in a survival situation, because you can get the fats and proteins that you need from the nuts. So that's one thing to know. Also talking about trees, if you're getting a homestead, planting fruit trees should probably be one of the first things that you do, because it's going to take years for them to develop fruit. And the best time to plant a fruit tree is 5 years ago. And the second best time is right now, is the way that I look at it. It's kind of a running joke, but it's 100% true. So when you move out to your homestead, you know, planting apple trees or pear trees or things like that, you know, should probably be one of your first things you do within the first year or two. And I try to put in 2 or 3 new fruit trees every year. So that's just my strategy for it. Everyone can have their own strategies, and but that's just mine. And foraging as well, when I talk about, a lot of it gives you some vitamins, minerals. You can get a little bit of, you know, calories, very minimal calories to sustain yourself. But you also need to keep in mind, if you're out there in a survival situation, how many calories are you expending looking for these things? You know, if you're walking miles and miles, you better find a lot of greens. You know, if you're just eating the greens, you better find a lot of greens to sustain yourself, because the calories you're burning walking and looking for those things is not going to offset the calories of the forage you find, unless you're being smart about it and, you know, being very particular like I'm talking about. And that's one good thing about a tree. You don't have to look far to find it and to use those things. But a couple other really good foraging things. I do like to eat some of the greens. Plantain. I make a lot of teas from mullein and goldenrod and some other things. Daisies are another good one. Wild daisies. But, you know, the prickly pear cactus, I showed you guys that in one of the videos. That's a pretty good one. If you can find a lot of that, sometimes it'll grow in a very large area and you don't have to go far to find it. But when you're starting the forage and you're learning about it, if you're new to it, start off with 5 or 6 things that you know and kind of branch off from there. Get yourself a solid base. Trees are a pretty good start to a base. Maybe a couple different green plants, and work your way out from there. The most common one everyone talks about foraging, and really one of the most nutritious ones, is dandelion as well. That's another one that I like. But I wanted to talk a little bit about foraging because I'm going to be putting out a very basic video on Saturday. It's not going to show every plant in the world, but just some common plants as I was walking around my yard that you might be able to use. Tea, a lot of teas. You can make a lot of teas from it, and those things can give you vitamins, minerals, and you know, help with some of your health ailments and things like that. I talk about in the video sassafras tea, goldenrod tea, mullein tea, a lot of teas. A lot of the stuff is kind of hard to eat on its own, but as a tea, it can provide you some nutrients that you need to live. So that's just some basics on foraging there, guys. You know, just my opinion on it. It'd be very hard to live off just foraging alone. It'd be a pretty hard life if you were doing that. You know, talking about, you know, very primitive hunters and gatherers. The two kind of work together though as a community. One would go out and hunt and the other would go out and gather, and they'd bring the stuff together to make a meal. It usually wasn't one way or the other 100%. So anyway, I'll get into my testimony a little bit. And as far as it goes, I was previously working in the financial industry, and you know, I was originally I was working in Chicagoland, and I transferred down to Arizona. The weather was great. The taxes were lower, the roads were nicer, but I had to live in a urban environment down there, and I had never lived in an urban environment, and it seemed almost like a utopia, was how my sister described it to me down there. And I said, yeah, I said, it's great. But the more that I lived down there, the less I enjoyed it. I don't drink and I don't smoke, and you know, part of it was the professionalism of the industry. I didn't really want to support those things. I wanted to be a very clean-cut person, and that was one good thing, because as a younger kid, I did smoke and drink. Well, I mean, I didn't smoke. I drank, though. You know, I think a lot of people party when they're younger and things like that. Not a good thing, but you know, as far as it goes, it's just kind of the American culture, you know, bar culture, as they call it when you're in college and you're in high school and things like that. But anyway, I quit all that. I worked in the financial industry for quite a while, and I transferred from Chicagoland down to Arizona, and I loved Arizona, but I was living in the city and there just was no nature, and I wasn't used to it because I had always lived in the country and on a farm, and I was trying, you know, to like it, but I just couldn't. It just didn't feel right to me. You know, there's no trees, there's no water, there's no animals, there's no white-tailed deer that you're seeing everywhere, there's no cornfields. You know, it just didn't, it wasn't my thing. And when COVID hit, the things started to really go kind of crazy. A lot of things were changing with the job and everything like that. And, you know, I kind of realized how helpless people are in the city at that point. Walmart was getting drained. You know, you go there. I went there the day before everyone was fighting over toilet paper, and got all my groceries and stuff and just stocked up. And working in the stock market, I seen the stock market drop 6%, and I kind of realized, I'm like, man, yeah, people are going to be freaking out. They're going to be freaking out. So I went and got groceries that night, and Walmart was right across the street from where I lived. So anyway, I went and got groceries, and the first, you know, when I first went, it was all full, and I went back like a month later just to see how the store was, honestly, and it was about half full. And I went back about 1 month later, and it was like a quarter of the way full. The shelves were almost bare. And I kind of realized, in an area like Arizona, the water comes from the city, the food comes from Walmart or whatever other store, and your sustenance really comes from, everything comes from somewhere else. Nothing's produced. And I kind of just realized how unsustainable it is. And, you know, thinking about all the ghost towns out in the deserts, how many there is, it kind of shows you how unsustainable that is. Throughout the Midwest and kind of the Rust Belt and stuff, there's a lot of small towns that were founded on agriculture, or some of them were founded, there's one manufacturing factory that brought jobs in, things like that. And those towns still continued even after some of those factories shut down. They didn't just become ghost towns, and the reason for that is because they actually have water there, and they actually have some food that they can produce there, and things, you know, from close by. Anyway, that's in a town environment, but generally they're rural towns. And just kind of realized how unsustainable a city like that in the middle of the desert was. It didn't really logistically make a lot of sense if you think about where you're going to put a city. Why would you pick the most desolate place in the world? But anyway, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't like it there. I loved Arizona, and the views were beautiful and things like that, but I just didn't really feel comfortable in the city. And being that I don't smoke or drink, that was one of the main things that people do in the city. It just wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted, or that I would like enjoy doing. And if you're not going to the bar, it seems like to me in the city, what else is there to do? I mean, after you've seen all the zoos and all the tourist attractions, you know, there isn't much to do after that other than just go to the bar and drink, which seems like the national pastime these days. You know, I'm not saying if you do those things, you know, I'm not condemning that. It's your life. But I was just trying to live a clean life and not do those type of things. And that was really all there was to do in the city. So I didn't really feel like I had anything that I enjoyed in town there. The only things I ever enjoyed doing my whole life were hunting, fishing, and being outdoors. Sports, I guess. I enjoyed working out and things like that. But other than that, there's nothing I ever wanted to do other than those things. And at the time, you know, with all the turmoil in the world with COVID and everything like that, I was watching a lot of off-grid channels, and a lot of the off-grid channels were talking about things that I already knew a lot about. You know, agriculture and farming and gardening and raising sheep, and talking about, you know, woods and starting fires and things like that. And I'm like, you know, I already know a lot of those things just being from a farm and being from the country. And I was enjoying watching those channels though, and those videos and the lifestyle. And one day I was a little bit stressed out one day, and I went to Canyon Lake out in Arizona. It's a lake up in the Superstition Mountains, and I used to go up there and fish once in a while. It was about 40 some minutes from my house, and I used to enjoy going up there and fishing and just enjoying it. It was a beautiful drive up there, and I went past the lake for the first time one day, and there's a little restaurant up there called in a place called Tortilla Flats. And after that, if you keep going, there's a lookout. There's a lookout, and there's some hiking trails down into the mountains out there. And actually, there's a road that goes through like 20 miles to another lake called Roosevelt Lake. It's a very historical trail. The Indian tribes had used it for years and years. I think 10,000 years the Apache used it or something like that prior. But they turned it kind of into a road, and it's a very crazy that you can drive through it. But anyway, I was up at the lookout there, and you know, I was a little bit stressed out, and it was the first time I had been up there, and I was kind of just exploring. And I had brought a bag of oranges with me to eat. I was like, oh, that'll be good up there, watch the sunset. And the Lord just kind of struck me that day, and I could see so far, and it was just such an amazing view. And at that time I realized just how small everything I was doing was in the grand scheme of the world. And I decided that day that I was gonna do the off-grid thing. You know, that was kind of what I decided. So I started planning it, and you know, I was looking at where do you go? You know, another thing that really opened my eyes talking about this was the fact that I had driven from Illinois to Arizona multiple times, and the amount of open and vast and beautiful land in that drive opened my eyes to the opportunity that this nation, you know, provides people. And where I'm from, farmland is like 15,000 an acre plus, and it never really seemed like something that you could actually own farmland to me. You know, that I could actually buy something and have some acres of land. It seemed like out of the reach of the average everyday individual, unless you were like old, you know. I mean, I guess unless I was older, maybe 40s, 50s, and I had saved up for years to do it. But driving across the country opened my eyes to all the opportunity there was outside of Illinois. And going to Arizona opened my eyes to that opportunity as well. And that sunset and that view where I could see hundreds and hundreds of miles, it was just an amazing view. So vast, so desolate, but it made you feel so small in the grand scheme of the world. And I realized that the only thing at that point that I was enjoying was watching those off-grid videos and the off-grid lifestyle online. And I said, you know, I'm going to do that. So I decided to start planning it. And I was looking at land in Oklahoma and Kansas and, you know, some of the places like Montana and things like that. And I looked at all the off-grid channels, and the most successful ones were all in the Ozarks. And one of the channels had mentioned that there was no zoning or building codes in southern Missouri, and I said, that sounds pretty cool. And when I looked at land prices, it was so cheap at the time. This was about 2 or 3 years ago. I said 10 acres, you know, for $30K. I said, wow. I said, that's especially compared to where I was from. But when I was looking at land in all these different states, I kind of realized that the stuff where I was from was a little bit overpriced in my mind. As far as wanting to actually own something, it seems it's unsustainable for the average individual unless you're using a debt or a loan for it. So anyway, I said that sounds great, and you know, this after a while, I quit my job and I went to the Grand Canyon just to see it before I left because I had never been, and it's one of those things that people talk about, but truthfully that day up in the Superstition Mountains touched me more than that. You know, it was amazing what God, what he showed me that day and opened my eyes and my heart to making a change. And but I went to the Grand Canyon, and I went there on kind of a whim before I was planning on leaving, and it was snowing and you couldn't see anything. So I stayed up there overnight in a small hotel in I forgot the name of the town, but there's a town up there that's really expensive, all the hotels, and there was one in town that was fairly normal priced, and I stayed in that one, and it was great. And the next day I went and I seen the Grand Canyon, and it was beautiful, and it was wonderful, and it was majestic, and it was just like everyone talks about. And then about 2 or 3 days later, I got my supplies, and I drove out to southern Missouri, and you know, I drove all the way there. I stayed one night in Elk City, Oklahoma, and as far as it goes out there, it just it was I liked it out there. I love the nothingness of Oklahoma sometimes, and I love all the cattle out there as well. But there's just so much beauty across the land, and every state has their own beauty. It seems like I've never been to a state and I'm like, man, this is just every one. The change of regions and the change of landscapes is just so amazing to me. How you can go from desert to forest to mountain to cornfield to, you know, different to coastal. It's just a unbelievably and beautiful country we have. And but anyway, I stayed in Elk City one night, kept driving. I went to some town near the border on southern Missouri and southwest Missouri, and I stayed in a hotel there for probably a week, and I picked about 5 to 10 properties on Zillow that were in the region, and a realtor showed them to me there, and I actually offered on one. I went to the east side of the state for a week as well and looked at some properties, but I offered on one on that side of the state, and I had looked at a couple in this region that I'm in now in southeastern Missouri, and once I had that offer in on the other side of the state, another property popped up over here that was $9,000 cheaper, and it was about 3 days to closing. So I pulled my offer on that property and offered on this one without looking, but it was contingent upon me viewing the property. So that's something to keep in mind if you are going off grid. You can make an offer contingent upon you viewing the property and being okay with everything. So anyway, I made the offer, came out here, looked at it, closed on it. You know, I went up to Illinois and got the check ready and everything, and I brought my new dog Bailey with me. I adopted him in Arizona, and he's got some aggression problems, and they were giving him away for free on Craigslist. And coming out here, I didn't really know anyone, so I got a mean dog, and I already had plenty of firearms and things, so I wasn't too worried about it. But I got him specifically as a guard dog, and he's been wonderful. But the So I went up to Illinois, got everything ready, closed on the property, and then I came out here and stayed one night on the way in a tent, and me and him got like 200 plus ticks, so that was a good lesson. But there were so many little signs that happened on this trip. The first week that I was out here and I finally had bought the property and finally came out here and moved out here, I would cook everything on the fire. And I cooked everything on the fire my whole first year out here. And I was staying in a tent and staying in my car. And, you know, I had been so defensive, worried about how people were going to be out here in the hills. And I'm sure there's places that they are a little more standoffish than they were here. But that first month, about 9 different people pulled in and all introduced themselves, all very nice people. And anyway, talking back to cooking on the fire, the first week I was out here, I was cooking on the fire and a little blue bird, about that big, landed right at my feet. And I reached down and I picked it right up in my hand. And that to me was just a sign from God that he had led me, and I let him lead me. I could have not went in faith. You know, I could have pondered it and backed out and gotten scared and, you know, I could have just been, I guess, you know, very weary about it. But I took that leap of faith to go do it. It took a big leap of faith. And I was so obsessed with the money before I had went out here. And I realized that there was a lot more to life than just that. Obviously, you need something to live, but I just realized that there was a lot more to life than that, and God was a lot bigger than money. And I had not been close with the Lord at the time. In fact, I would say I had been pretty disobedient to the Lord at the time. You know, I hadn't really paid a lot of attention. I hadn't been going to church for years. I hadn't read the Bible in years. But I did want to grow a little bit closer with the Lord. It was kind of in the back of my mind. It wasn't top priority. And when I came out here, though, and I talk about that little blue bird, it was just kind of a sign from God to me. And another thing that was kind of funny is I didn't have a Bible when I moved out here, and my neighbors gave me one. And the Lord kind of put that Bible into my hand. He brought it to me and put it in my hand, which I thought was kind of interesting because I didn't have one when I moved out here. And I started going to church with them, and that's a long story, and it was good. I definitely learned a lot about the Bible there. The other thing that I was going to say is that was so amazing about this was they actually had bought their property 1 month before I did. And they, there was another person that they had bidded the same price as someone else, and the other person pulled their offer on the closing day, so they ended up getting that house, and they ended up moving in 1 month before me. You know, what are the odds that that would happen that way, and I would end up with a Bible in my hands that way? You know, that to me was the Lord working. It was just so unbelievable. And since then I've become very close with the Lord, and there's been so many little signs out here along the way. Like, for example, that first year that I was out here, I got my well drilled and I was working on the water situation, and I had some people come and drill the well. And out here the wells can be anywhere from 10 to 25 grand, so it just depends on where you're at. The average isn't that high, but you just never know how deep they're going to have to go, and they charge by the foot. And I did my video on budgeting a homestead, and I didn't really know at the time how it was going to work budget wise. And the thing that was interesting about it was that was one thing I was worried about. You know, if it was real if they had to go real deep, or if they didn't hit water, or if the water was going to be any good, and things like that. And I had prayed to the Lord, Lord, I said, please just make this a reasonable depth. I don't want to go bankrupt on this. I said, Lord, please just make this a reasonable depth. Lord, please bring me the water, and please, forgive my sins and things like that. And that was kind of how the prayer went. And I just asked him to help me with that. And the average well depth out here is about 300 some foot, and maybe even more than that, probably like 330. And I had prayed to the Lord the night before they drilled this well, started drilling the well. And the well truck showed up, and when they showed up, they had on the side of their truck John 4:14. And I'll just read that to you here. It was John 4:14. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up in the everlasting life. And soon as I saw that on the side of the well truck, I knew that it was going to be good. And the well ended up being 235 feet. It was the shallowest well around, really. Most people's, like I said, are 330, so it turned out just wonderful. And I saved thousands and thousands of dollars with that depth. So that was really just a blessing from the Lord. And to me, it was all a sign. And I think that sometimes in the faith, we manifest ourselves in the spiritual and don't realize some of the physical that's going on around us. And those things that I talked about in my testimony here are some of the things that I thought were very physical, that he had did and touched me. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the leap of faith. How I had to take that leap of faith, and sometimes that leap of faith can be kind of hard for us to take. But anyway, guys, talking about going out on a leap of faith and taking that chance. This is from Luke chapter 9, and it says, Then he called his 12 disciples together and gave them power and authority over all devils and to cure diseases. And he sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And he said unto them, Take nothing for your journey, neither staves, nor scrip, neither bread, neither money, neither have 2 coats apiece. And whatsoever house ye enter into, there abide, and thence depart. And whosoever will not receive you, when you go out of that city, shake off the very dust from your feet for a testimony against them. And they departed and went through the towns, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. So the point is that sometimes we need to have the faith to take that leap. He told the disciples to go out with nothing. They went out with nothing, unprepared, and they let the Lord lead them. And it talks about that same story in Mark and Matthew, multiple places in the Bible. But I kind of felt that way when I came out here off grid. I felt like the Lord led me, and I let him lead. I didn't say, well, what if this, what if that? I'm not saying I didn't prepare, I didn't buy some supplies, I didn't think about things ahead of time. There was a lot of what ifs and what if this, what if that, but I let the Lord lead, and I took that leap of faith and that chance, and it's been one of the greatest decisions, if not the greatest decision. Actually, I would say the greatest decision that I've ever made in my life, because I grew close to the Lord from it, And I've got a wonderful homestead out here now. And that was just part of the point, that leap of faith and talking about the signs and wonders that the Lord presents, not just in the spiritual sense, but also in the physical sense. And sometimes, there are just different things that happen out here that just reinstate that thought in my mind that the Lord led me here. I talked about some of the different signs that kind of came on my journey, and I've kind of worked with the land and worked by the sweat of my brow to get things to where they are now. But I just wanted to give my testimony on, my journey to go off grid, what led me here, how I ended up here, and just some of the things that happened once I got here that I just don't think could have been coincidental. And I think it's important, if you don't believe in Christ and you watch my channel, that's perfectly fine. My channel's for everyone. But I decided, I'm very close with the Lord, and every Wednesday I'm gonna read one psalm. I'm just gonna do a video reading the psalm. You can watch if you want. They're very motivational readings. A lot of times about the Lord lifting you above your enemies and such. And but I'm gonna start in Psalms 1, and I'm gonna read one psalm every Wednesday. You're welcome to watch if you're interested in that kind of thing. I'm not going to interpret the psalm for anyone. I'm just going to read. But anyway, guys, I'm going to start reading one psalm every Wednesday. I'm just going to make a video reading the psalm for people to see. I know a lot of my viewers watching the channel are in other countries, and I know sometimes it can be harder to come by a Bible and things like that. So I just decided Psalms are a very motivational book, and I would read one psalm every Wednesday for the world to hear. And as far as it goes, talking about that leap of faith, and talking about, how he asked the disciples to go out with nothing, and it's a very vulnerable position, being put in a position like that, and going out when you're unsure of something. They had nothing with them. They had to really truly rely on the Lord in that situation. But I just wanted to read here. It is part of how I felt, part of how I felt when I was going off grid, the way my life was, and the way that everything was going, the way the world was, the way I could have kept doing it and it would have been a safe way to go, but I just didn't feel like I had what I needed spiritually, and what I needed mentally, physically. It just, something didn't feel right. As much money as you can make, working a career or a job or things like that, sometimes you might feel unfulfilled. And even in other things too, talking about the drinking and the partying and things like that. And sometimes we're looking for something and we're looking in all the wrong places. And I think sometimes that something we're looking for might be some faith, and faith in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who died for our sins. But I just wanted to read this here. It's Mark chapter 8, verse 34 is where it starts. And I know that I might lose some subscribers possibly, based on this biblical rant that I'm talking about. It's not a rant, it's biblical scripture. But this talks about that a little bit, but it also talks about that feeling you might have in the world every day. And when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. And for what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Whosoever therefore shall be ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he cometh in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? That's kind of how I feel about what I'm doing out here, and it wouldn't have profited me anything to stay and continue doing what I was doing. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Tune in on Wednesdays if you're interested in hearing a psalm, or maybe you've never heard psalms or the Bible. Maybe that's something that you're interested in hearing. I'm going to read one psalm starting in Psalms 1 every Wednesday. Just thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're new to the channel and you enjoy the content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Sit. Sit. Come on, sit. Oh, good boy. Good boy. Lay down. Lay down. All right. Good boy. Hey, guys, let's make Bailey famous. Let's make Bailey famous. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mustache Off Grid. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and God bless. Let's make Bailey famous, guys.